Hey, folks, it's Andy Tyndall. Thanks for tuning in. The podcast is going to get rolling in just a little bit. Today's episode is all about strength. We get to hear from our guest, Timika Simmons, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Tamagwa Healthcare Ministries. Timika tells us her story, her journey of childhood trauma, becoming a teen mom, going through a divorce, being paralyzed, to end up as a volunteer at the organization that she currently runs. She's really not supposed to be there. She shares with us how she tapped into emotional strength, mental strength, and spiritual strength to achieve her greater purpose. Really hope you enjoy this episode. Hey folks, welcome to the Human Side of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tyndall. And for today's episode, one word comes to mind, and that word is strength. Strength in the face of adversity, making it through life's obstacles in a flawless fashion. That's what you'll hear in terms of the story from our guest today. And our guest is the CEO of Tamagwa Healthcare Ministries in the Houston area. And if you're not familiar with Tamagwa, they have been providing charitable health care for the past 31 plus years to low income and uninsured residents. Now, our guest has been the CEO for the past 2 years, but's been in the healthcare administration industry for the past 20 plus years. She's a mother of 3 and a mentor to so many others. Please welcome to our show, Ms. Timika Simmons.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Glad to be here.
So, with the start of every show, we always have a couple of questions to kick it off, just simple questions. And so, my first question for you is: if you had the option of not going to sleep and getting your full 8 hours of sleep, that's recommended, and you had this extra 8 hours of time, what would you choose to do with it?
I would chase the sun and enjoy the different textures of the earth. And maybe that's coming with age. If you had asked me this 5 years ago or 10 years ago, if I had an extra 8 hours, I would figure out a way how to level up even more with that 8 hours. And just showing my daughters things, I want to expose them so much to how to take advantage of opportunity. And so, but now I appreciate stopping and breathing and not having enough hours in my day. If you gave me 8, I would try to at least fly to 2 or 3 places, squeeze it all in.
Wow. So fly to 2 or 3 places. All right. So now we're in this travel theme. Now. So if you did have an opportunity to travel somewhere, whether it's within the United States or anywhere around the world, what would be your top spot that you would go to and why?
First, I would like to go to Africa, where, some parts of South Africa, of course, is beautiful, but even some of the most torn places in Africa, even being an African American and not being in touch with any of my ancestors who came from Africa, I still have this longing to go and just kind of see where it all began for us. And so that would be important to me, just the land, the people, the psychology, how they operate, and identify some type of connection for my own strength. And just understanding what's everything that's encoded in my DNA. That's important to me. And so I would love to just go and see what I was physically and mentally built for, on that continent. That's where we were born. And then how does that apply to the place I live now? So Africa would definitely.
Africa is a great choice in my personal opinion too. So, but it's interesting to hear your take as to getting to understand the physical nature of it, the mental aspect of it, and just the entire surroundings of what came before us. So that's a great choice. Simply put, great choice. So,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of your day to day work, thank you for taking time out to talk with me today. We always just try to find inspirational stories for the listeners, and yours is definitely one of them. If you can, first off, tell the listeners how they can get in contact with Tamagwa and with Timika.
So I have a LinkedIn page that I try my best to pay attention to, and keep it very professional, and usually do updates on what's going on with Tamagwa. That's such a huge part of my heart and my ultimate mission. As we get through my story, I was able to see how so many different things that happened to me were really happening for me to prepare me for this season, and what we're doing at Tamagwa. So if you just look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see me, my history, links to Tamagwa. They can reach out to me. I try to check the inbox and filter out all the spam, but I try to check it on Facebook. I can be followed, but I do only friend people I may have met. But I make a lot of things public because I am a mentor. I've embraced all these awards I've gotten for being inspiring and someone to look up to. And so a lot of things I do make public. And so if I do not friend someone, they can still feel connected, because friending, I do have to protect my children and the things I do personally. And not everyone has good intentions, but probably about 85% of everything is public. Tamagwa's website, my web address is there. On my Twitter, which I'd never do Twitter. I'm still trying to figure that out.
It's all good.
So
it's all good.
Don't even ask me about Snapchat and TikTok. Just like, don't. I can't. And then Tamagwa.org. We try to keep things updated there. We just launched a new website, and so the blog will be backfilled. But my team that handles communications, we try to blog and just put some type of update on our services and what we're doing. Every month, we put all our press coverage, all of our initiatives, and what's going on in the 600 square mile service area, and how we're working with legislature and community organizations and other hospital systems, and just everyone, how we're pulling all of those resources together to provide education for future healthcare professionals, but then also bring the best possible healthcare to our families that we're responsible for.
So just a question off the top of my head here. How many patients do you think the collective clinics see in a given year?
We have, and I know this number because I have to for so many grants, but prior to COVID, we were at about 33,000 visits a year. We are a medical home, and so those visits include pharmacy, lab, diabetic clinic. We have an award-winning hypertension program with the American Heart Association. We have this comprehensive dental program where you can get everything done. We're the only one in our region. So that counts for all those services, the vision services, the case management, anything that we need, and we go to 12 different doctors for, and 12 places for. We have brought all of these services together in each center. And so when I say the 33,000 visits, that's all of those things put together. There are over 100,000 uninsured people in our service area before COVID. And so we are barely scratching the surface.
Can you just pause and say that number one more time?
100,000 uninsured individuals in our service area prior to COVID. And that's just a small 600 square mile radius where Montgomery County, Waller County, and Harris County intersect. So if it's just that region, imagine if you just capture all of Harris or all of Waller, or all of Montgomery, even just the city of Houston.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people who work every day and do not have insurance, and they don't qualify for the Medicaid or Medicare, so they're kind of stuck.
And so what about like staffing for the organization? What does the staffing numbers look like in terms of people that are actually helping the 33,000 patients that you will see collectively? And
so we have a combination of volunteers and paid staff. And just like any other health center, doctors, pharmacists, dentists, nurses, practitioners, specialists, the administrative professionals. I have my financial officers and operations, and just like any other organizations, we have all those staff persons, but I have to mix that up with volunteers. And so thank God for just the heart of the community. We are a Christian organization also, which is great, which is beautiful. Yeah. We have that covering over us. I'm able to offset about $250,000 a year off my budget just for volunteer services. And I'm not talking about when we have the annual fundraiser and the people who come and help set up the tables and things like that. I'm talking about professionals who are coming in, from project managers to operational efficiency experts who work for large hospital systems. I'm talking about real professionals who come and volunteer their time so we can deliver services and they really cut back on those millions of dollars I have to find every year to operate with no government funding, no insurance billing, all private donations. Those volunteers really play a huge role in our budget.
So the organization, if I'm hearing you correctly, is still 100% privately funded?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so with Texas most recently going through the ice storm, I grew up in New Jersey, so it wasn't quite an ice storm, but it was lack of power in terms of electricity and lack of water for a lot of organizations. Mm-hmm. How did Tamagwa fare during that time frame?
We're very blessed on some ends, and then of course we had to take some loss. Two of our facilities did well, and I have, even as professional as we are, have some handyman and old trucks and get excited about adventure. And so I had a guy, I don't know how he was doing it, but he was getting around and checking on my places, wow. My main places. And so I didn't lose power or water. My server got knocked off a little bit, so he made sure that got on for the people who were working from home. But one of our premier facilities, we lost power in the building that location is in. Also, the generators failed. And there's a ER in that building, a large pharmacy, other doctor's offices. And so with that, we lost a lot of medications in the insulin, immunizations. And we even had a nurse who walked a mile in the snow trying to get there and save the medications because they have to be maintained at a certain temperature. And we have protocols in place, and we would have had a certain amount of time where we could have gotten that medication over to our backup, which is that hospital ER, which is downstairs. They have extra freezers, but they were out. And so we lost, and doing a count again, about 70,000 in immunizations, medications, insulin, things like that. So that was the big loss.
You look around the state of Texas and you see a lot of devastation, north, south, east, west, all over. But just, looking at facilities like yours, organizations like yours that are privately funded, that still need help, it would be great to see people whether donate resources, funds, their time to really help you guys get back up and running fully. So if people want to do that, what should they do?
Our website, again, is a great place. We have a Get Involved section, and that's where you can learn about making monthly or one big donations. We do stocks, we do pledges, matching gifts. A lot of companies, if you donate, they will match it 100%. And then you can find the volunteer opportunities. We are updating the full supply list for the medications, but something like that, if people cannot donate the cash, sometimes people have contacts. They know people who have things, and that has come through so much for us historically. And so if someone works in the healthcare industry, or they may be connected to someone who is large organizations who may have resources, or doctor's offices or labs, that's very important to us. I lost a lot of lab supplies. Then we having those connections, sometimes people can write off, or they connect with us and they want to partner with us, and they may say, okay, all the patients who need insulin, send them to me and I'll take care of their insulin needs. So sometimes we get arrangements like that. We do have a patient assistance fund where people donate to. So if I do have to send my patient for surgery or to someone who will help them with the insulin, if there's a small cost associated with it, we can pay for it out of that so that patient's really not out of pocket for the private pay rate. So again, just our website, we keep the Get Involved section pretty updated, the services, the volunteer opportunities, and they can just connect from there.
That's so fantastic to hear. I'm so glad to hear you in a position to be able to give back to the Houston area where you grew up. But I'm also inspired to know that you have probably more than one, but to hear the story about the one nurse walking through the snow to try to, help other people. That doesn't happen just because of one person. That happens because of great leadership, in my personal opinion. So, Timika, from the standpoint of the healthcare administration world, the business world, how did you get going with that? Like, what inspired you? Who or what got you inspired to want to get into that field of work? Because that's not your background. Was anybody in your family in that world?
No. It's interesting when, and let me start off with saying hindsight is 2020,
Okay.
right? And how we think about hindsight is after something's happened, and then we look back and go, oh, okay, I could have did this different, or now I see why that works. And so what I attribute to where I am now is just way back when I was a little girl, God just kind of set me on this path of discovery and things not working out and having to persist. And initially, I didn't know about healthcare or business or anything. And it's just through experiences that led me to want to be a doctor initially. And then I was fascinated with the business world. And then I would have these jobs and you work them and you do great and you have these callings. And I was never a person who just took a job and just say, okay, this is my job and hang out at the water cooler and talk about the big people. I was always bright eyed at who's calling the shots and how does this thing work and what makes it work and what's my part in it. So I always had this bigger thought and concept, and I always wanted to be next to the people who are making decisions or driving the organizations, not for cloud chasing, but to learn. It's like, how did you get there and how are you able to make these decisions? How did this whole thing come about? And then the people I worked with, I was just always fascinated with them. And so that's how my path kind of navigated me through to be where I am now. And we can back up and go into details, just hitting each spot if you want to. You can tell me how.
Yeah, no,
do that.
That's great. So your story is one with a lot of different layers. So let's look at from the standpoint of the word strength. And you said God put you in a lot of different situations so you can actually help yourself and help others from there. At what point would you say in your life adversity showed up?
As a little girl, when I was young, very young, my father used to molest me. I was so young, I didn't even know what that was. I mean, those were my only memories of him. And we didn't live with him. He hardly came around. I grew up with my grandparents. Poor, like 13 grandkids in the house, sleeping on the floor, sleeping on the couch. And every, now and again, my dad would come and pick us up. So it had to have gone back from the time I was maybe about 5 years old or so. It's just all I remembered. And I remember being 10 years old and seeing a video at school, and they were talking about families and relationships and improper touching. And in that video, I saw what my dad had been doing with me was wrong.
Wow.
And I never liked it as a kid. It made me very uncomfortable. But that young, and for the younger group, television that day, back in those days, we were not exposed to all of this sex stuff. None of that was out. People were fully dressed. And so if you were a kid and you played outside all day, and even if you saw television, you didn't know anything about sex and intimacy.
No.
And so and being one of those kids that was just out playing all the time, I just thought that was something you know, dads did. And he would come in the room at night. And so when I realized that, I remember being in my classroom in elementary, and I remember just taking off running out of the classroom. And I lived about maybe 3/4 of a mile from home.
Okay.
From school. And we used to walk to school. So I just remember running out the classroom, running out the front door. And it was near the end of the day, and just running down that long street, just running home. And that day, my dad was supposed to pick me up from school. And I just remember running and looking back, toward the school, and I saw his truck coming. Like, he was like, what is she doing? And coming after me. And in my mind, I was terrified. Like, this monster, he's trying to get me. And I was running so fast and so hard. Finally got home to my grandparents, and, I'm out of breath, and I was trying to tell them what happened, and he's out there, and it was just a lot of chaos. But that's when it hit me, because during that time, you didn't talk about this. And if you did, it was kept quiet. I learned later, as I started mentoring young ladies and doing research on this, that sometimes families knew that this was happening, and it had been happening for generations, but you just didn't talk about it. So looking at how my grandmother on my dad's side treated me and ostracized me, and I kind of got in trouble for saying something.
So you wait a minute. So you telling me that you got in trouble for speaking up to your grandmother about what your father, her son, was doing with you? Wow.
Yeah, exactly. My grandmother that I lived with, my mom's mom, called her. I think I said something before I left the school because the police came. And so I can't remember but I must have said something. And because I know my grandmother didn't call the police.
Okay.
So I had both grandmothers there. And remember, my grandmother raised me. So these are the people I trust. These are my parents.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, how could you do this? And at 10 years old, I didn't know what was happening, but that's when God started to build this core of strength in me, because I had to mentally and psychologically work my way through that. I didn't have the support system that like someone would have today. There was just no support from my family.
When you said there was no support from your family, what do you mean? I know you said it was chaos, but now you're saying there was no support at that point in time. Just let me and let the listeners understand what you mean.
It wasn't talked about. And it was this thing that everybody knew. I started being referred to as that rape girl, and my family, no one really gathered around me. You knew there were people who were kind of like, how could she say that? And then there were the people who kind of treated me like I had a disease. My cousins who I were very close with on my dad's side, we just lost connection. I couldn't play with them anymore. And I was just kind of by myself. And so when I say no support, no one loving you and saying it's going to be okay and asking how you're doing from my family at all, no one. And I remember I called her counselor, but now I know she was my lawyer. I didn't know the term.
Well, she was counselor, though. That was the right name.
She ended up, but she was really like a counselor. And I remember her being the only person who cared, because the state, I guess, or the county took over the case, and she was assigned to me. And I remember the days I would have to go downtown and talk to people and tell this story because they were building the case and get the exams. She would come and get me. She would, oh God, you're going to make me cry. I never have to talk about this.
I'm holding myself back from crying right now because it's a lot.
And I remember she would bring clothes and stuff and wipe my face in her car. And I was a little black girl with this wild hair and this little frail white lady. She was trying her best to get my hair under control. And so I remember her caring because she would try to talk to me and coach me through it. And she would put me in her car and take me to those appointments. And I'm like way in neighbors' homes, and I don't know where she lived, but I knew we would have to go downtown. But that's the person I remember back then.
So,
And she protected me. She helped me.
and treated you like a human,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
She made sure I didn't feel bad, but there was still this part of me because that was what maybe once a month or I don't know the timeline, but over a certain time period, I
okay.
had that periodically. And it helped. But in between her coming to get me to take me to, even when it was time to go to court, um, I had to hold myself together until she came. But I did not know that's what I was doing. This was something happening. I would say God on the spiritual side was building this. And so I played a lot. I was a tomboy. So I was outside racing with the boys barefoot, climbing trees and timing myself on how many cartwheels I could do around the house and just just busy. And I ended up being distracted from it, just finding something I enjoyed, teaching myself to ride my bike with one hand,
Wow.
all kind of stuff. Yeah, just just to stay distracted. And that's when the strength journey, I would say, began
Really
with me.
really kicked off. Okay. So, with your dad, what ended up happening with your dad?
Well,
And
thank God
I
he
want to
was
just pause.
convicted,
I want to pause real
and
quick too. I want to say I am just like I'm I'm really sad that you had to go through that, and I'm
mhm.
really disgusted that any kids have to go through that. So it's a lot. That's a
Thank
whole lot
you.
to process. Yeah.
And when you have children and you think about that, um, it's a lot. It is. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And so with him, what was the outcome with him?
He was convicted and had to do prison time. And my counselor was really good. And she really wanted to protect me from having to testify. And she did a great job. So I remember going to court that day and I had to be prepared just in case they needed me, but they did not. And I
Okay.
just remember the last time I saw him, I was sitting in what I assume was like the judge's chambers or maybe where the jury goes. At that time, I didn't know, but I remember her opening the door to come in, and I looked and I could see him sitting on the witness stand, and that was the last time I had saw him because then the door closed and she came in and she said, "You're not going to have to testify. He's going to go to jail. You did a great job." Because she had to, coach me through talking about this a lot. So he was there all the way until 1998. So he served some hard time.
Wow.
So the system worked in my case back then, but I was so blessed to get the counselor I had gotten, and I have to find her. I have to figure out how to
I was just going
find
to ask you
her.
if you ever looked her back up again to see like where
I
she's at,
know
what she's doing in her life.
she would love it because I remember after it was all over, her family traveled to Mexico, and I didn't play with dolls. I told you I was a tomboy,
Yeah.
but I remember her writing me a letter and sending me a letter with a picture of her family from Mexico, and she was just encouraging me and telling me about the kids. And then she gave me this little Mexican doll. It was a blush. It was all these colors and everything. But I tell you, I cherished that doll. I loved it. And living there, I don't know what happened to the letter and the doll because where I lived, you didn't have a room or
No,
a space for your things.
not with
But
13 kids.
even, yeah, after it was all over, for her to even go that far and just send me something to say, "Hey, I miss you, and you're gonna do great," and that's a beautiful person. So
Yeah. So that
yeah.
doll, in my personal opinion, was like a symbol of her kindness to you, her professionalism to actually win the case, and
Mhm.
give you some level of hope. And just kind of looking at it from that standpoint. And there was one other important visual that you painted with your words, and that was seeing him on the stand testifying, and then the door closed, And it was almost, to me, it was almost like you closed that chapter of your life when that door closed.
Wow, you just gave me goosebumps. Like, I
Sorry.
never thought of that.
Sorry.
You're the male Oprah. I figured this out now.
Oh boy. Sorry.
Where's my tissue?
You can pause and go get it if you want, but that was just a visual that came to me when
It's true.
when you use those words. And then the other thing that really stood out was how your family kind of turned their back on you, and with that time frame in your life, I was looking at it more like as if God left you alone, or they left you alone so you can get right with God and then go on to the next portion of your life.
I had to learn early, unconsciously, how to rely on the Spirit of God to set my spirit, to guide my spirit, to help me navigate things. And I did not even know that was happening, but you are so right in that illustration. It closed that door and I never thought about it again. I literally never thought about it again, because if you asked me later, instead of making that statement you made, and if you asked me, how have you coped? I would have said, I don't know. It doesn't bother me. But it's because, I mean, you painted that picture literally. The door was closed. My spirit was closed off from that. There was a lot of strength that had to be developed through that. But then it's like still going on to what next? I know I became very conscious of my life after that point, where before I was just a kid playing and you just lived in a moment. But I started to be aware of my surroundings, not knowing that that was God developing another gift in me, to learn to be very aware of my environment and studying people. Now when people watch me, not just do it for fun, but studying people and how they operate and why they do what they do, and never let anything like stick. I mean, after a hurt like that, it's hard for me to hurt. And it even causes problems now in relationships because, someone could feel like I don't care because I can get past things quickly. It's not that I've gotten past it. It's not that it doesn't bother me. It's just, it's been encoded in me before I could think of it, before I was conscious of it, how to take something, process it, and just move on, because you probably can't do anything about it, but in hurt quietly. Or just get it out of your system, because crying about it or hurting about it is not going to change anything. So yeah, I'm going to grab a napkin.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't know this was going to be the Oprah show.
So that chapter kind of presents itself, and then the door closes, literally. What's next for Timika on her journey in life so far?
So next was a lot of that aloneness, if I could say that, and living with my grandparents, going through school, dealing with the bullying and just playing. I just remember getting up, folding up my covers off the floor, putting them in the corner, and just going outside playing. There wasn't always food to eat, but just making the most of that time. My mom has her own story, her own struggles. And so I did not really have that relationship, and our relationship has really healed since then.
Okay.
The more mature I became, because she has her own story, and she wasn't there the way I would have wanted her to be. But again, there were things that affected her, and I know a couple of times she tried to do the family thing and bring us to live with her and whoever she was seeing at the time. And she suffered her share of terrible relationships. And one of those I was injured in. The guy was really going at it, beating my mom, and I tried to run up and stop him. And then he ended up hitting me, in the stomach and knocking me across the room, and I couldn't breathe. And so as I grew up, it really dawned on me that probably wasn't the only time. And that's probably why she kept us away. Yeah. Because she had her own struggles. And so just seeing those things and growing up, and then what's crazy is I in junior high in the school I was at, there was just a lot of what can I say? It was like lean on me.
Joe Clark, straight Joe Clark. That's a New Jersey guy, so thank you for the Jersey reference.
So that school was wow, and I remember just, I mean, you could be a girl and a guy could just want to fight you, and you just got to be ready to fight. And in my neighborhood, even walking home or whatever, you just had to be ready to fight. And it could be a guy, a girl, a crackhead, a wino at the store trying to get your lunch money. You just better be ready.
Be ready. That's it. Be ready.
Just, and I was a little tiny thing. Like I'm short, and back then I was like 80 pounds, and you just could never be scared. And regardless of, you can't be afraid of getting hit or hurt. You just better go at it, and people will leave you alone. And so I remember a guy kept bullying me because I wouldn't date him, but my friends were guys. I was a tomboy. I didn't want to go out with anyone. And he would taunt me and torment me. And so one day he hit me in my head with an umbrella, the point of an umbrella, because he was like, "You gonna be my girlfriend." And he like hit me real hard in my head with umbrella. And by then I had gotten tired of him, and I started bringing one of my grandmother's steak knives to school.
Right. That's perfect. That's perfect.
So he hit me in my head. This is terrible. This is so terrible. Not a lot of people know this story. My family does.
Okay.
But as he did that, I pulled that knife out of my bag, and then I like cut him from here to here. I think we're past the statute of limitations because my coaches hid the knife. The police were up there. They took me in the counselor's office, and one of the assistant principals, he was also the coach, and he said, "If you join the girls' basketball team, we'll make this go away for you."
What?
And I played ball before school every day, so they knew I could play. I was that girl that showed up and would get musty on the court because I would be out there doing pickup games, playing ball until school started. And so I joined the girls' basketball team and actually was an exceptional player. So I played ball, which was fun. That took a lot off.
Did you ever end up dating that guy, or was that a wrap after the slicing with the steak knife?
I think he got the message that that even if I did date him, he better not ever upset me. So I think he decided.
That's a good one. I like it.
I'm not violent, but
no. I was getting that, but there's a limit to how far people can take it after a time, and so he got the clear message that I think I've reached the limit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I played ball, and then when junior high was over, the high school I was on to was really scary. So I opted to go to a vocational school, which was Barbara Jordan.
Okay.
And that was really neat. And I was looking at architecture at the time. You had to pick a vocation, and I was very interested in drawing and buildings and all of that. And I met my high school sweetheart, and I was a virgin still, well, outside of what my dad had done, and ended up becoming a teen mom. And then that's the next major shift for me is, wow, my first time and what happened.
First time, and how old are you at that point?
15.
15 years old. Wow. Okay.
And that was the norm in my community. You became a teen mom, you get your job at Jack in the Box, get your welfare, get your little apartment, and you and your baby daddy live together, and y'all got this life. I wasn't trying to do it. I really liked my boyfriend. We really liked each other. And still at that point, no education on sex and protection. And because we thought that was not something you talk about, well, Jesus, you probably should. And so my first time that happened. So then I was a teen mom.
So teen mom at 15-ish years old, 15, 16?
I was 16 when I had her.
16, yeah, okay. So
I remember we lied to our parents, and they thought we were going with each other for Christmas vacation.
So wait a minute. So let me get this straight. You guys have worked out a strategy to convince the parents.
Had a plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
His parents thought he was with me, and my grandparents thought I was with him, but we had his parents' house to ourselves.
That is, when you got the house to yourself, you might make some babies. So
terrible. It was terrible.
So now teen mom, right? And
Teen
now
mom.
you said you awakened to the world at age 10, but now you got to be really awake because there's a small person coming to the world, and you're in charge. You're in charge of that person's
Oh
life and
yeah,
everything for them.
it shifted me because I had started going the wrong direction, or what was normal in my community. So at that age, people are, you're smoking weed, you're drinking because you can have the wino go get your 40 ounce for you if you buy him a beer.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah,
were the
yeah.
deals we
That
worked
was
in the hood.
that was the tip. You gave a little tip, yeah, that was his commission at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I don't promote any of this. Let me say that
Yeah,
disclaimer. This was just my life.
I don't either, and there are better ways to make it in life. That's what I
Yeah,
want to say.
and my kids know if I even hear of it, like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah.
But that woke me up because you're right. I had this person that I was responsible for, and something just clicked in me. And I said, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of the hood. Like, I cannot raise her here and, just come back, just being subject to all the things I knew I had to go through, fighting with school and the bullying and the drinking and no hungry all the time. Just, I had to get her out of that environment. So I remember pulling out the bus schedule and getting the newspaper with the job ads.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Because back in the day, there was no like online job searches. It was
there's
all
no
like classifieds.
internet. Yeah, you pull the classifieds, you see who's hiring, and then you have to call Metro to find out the schedules and how the buses connect and where you had to go. That was all new to me, but I figured it out because I had to get a real job. And I remember getting up, catching that bus, and that's where the 44 come from. People don't know that. That's why they call Acres Home the 44s, because that was
44.
our bus.
Wow.
And it took you from Acres Homes and out of the hood. It was my first time leaving, and I would have to go downtown and transfer to go wherever else I was going in the city to look for work.
Okay.
And so I remember from the first time, and then every time, the first time that bus dropped me in front of Foley's, it's not there anymore, but where Foley's was. And I just remember seeing all these people in their cars and in suits, and they're walking and they're busy and they're talking to each other and they're meeting and they're in their cars. I mean, everybody was just going and moving. And I'm like, what are they doing? Like, I want to be a part of this. To someone else that may be normal, but to me and where I came from, people were not just busy and going and moving, and whatever it was, I knew it was important. And I said, I have to be a part of this. Whatever is happening here, I didn't know if it was coordinated. I didn't know how to process
If it was
that
coordinated.
thought in depth. I just knew all these people knew something. They were busy. They were about something. They were focused. They were doing. And I just knew I needed to be doing. So I looked forward to my days of going out looking for jobs, because then it brought me downtown and then maybe the River Oaks or Bel Air or whatever. But I was doing also. I was in that some kind of way. I was connected to these people taking care of business.
Just by your act of looking for a job, you were in the movement process with them as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to after the molestation, and God started to teach me to pay attention to my surroundings, because how many people caught the bus on the 44 Acres Homes to go downtown and they go somewhere else, but they only paid attention to, I'm in my seat, I am thinking about somebody, I'm listening to my Walkman, then I go to my job where I'm sitting on the bus like a kid. I'm just looking out the window and looking at everything, and I'm studying the environment. And that's what made me say, you have to be a part of this, whatever it is.
So would you also say that the visual stimulation that was going on downtown almost pre-programmed you for a lot of your work that you've done over the past 20 some odd years?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I learned how to pay attention and look and see what's moving, what's making things happen. And then it took off from there. I didn't, there is where I learned, or where something happened with me, where if you want something, you just go get it. No one told me that. But I knew I needed a job, and I can't tell you how many times I rode the bus and how many places I applied to, because I wasn't paying attention to that. I knew I needed a job and I was going to get one. I didn't think about that I was pregnant. They wouldn't hire someone who's pregnant. I'm Black. I'm from Acres-Home. I probably didn't have great English because I think sometimes I slip now. But I didn't know any of my limitations. I just knew I needed a job, and I ended up with a job. And I just kept having that thing in me that as long as I was doing what these people are doing, something was going to happen because they keep doing it. They're doing something. And I got my job. And
Wow.
so since then, everything I wanted to do, I would just say, okay, this is what needs to happen. And then I would put the plan in place, just like pulling out the phone book and the classified ad and calling this person, putting the plan in place. And then, like I did with the bus, and I go out there and stand on the corner, wait for the bus to come. And then I went off into the world. That's how I handled my life. Put the plan in place. And then now you have it, go. And it's going to happen. I didn't understand stuff not happening. I didn't know how to process something could not happen.
That wasn't even part of your mindset. You said, I have a plan and this plan is going to work, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it's like you have to go do it. And if you do this stuff, it'll happen. I didn't know that people weren't hiring Black people. I didn't know about racism. I did not know about classism. I didn't know about
Sexism.
Females and statistics. Sex. I didn't know about any of that. I just knew I needed a job and people hire people.
So you get this first job and whew, off to the races. It's smooth sailing from there, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of? Oh, yeah. All right, let's go. Let's go. What do you mean kind of?
Well, it was good. It was good that I met my husband. I was able to finish school, thankful to my late uncle who said, no, you can't get a GED. I don't care about you having a baby. Boo-hoo. You could come live here and you're going to finish and get your high school diploma. And I really thank God for that, because I had a plan to just go get a GED and go to community college. But he said, Timika, why not? Go on and get your diploma. And that's where I learned don't settle. It may be harder. You may have to take a different route. You may not graduate with your class. But if it's something that you know you want to do and you need to do, just do it. And, and do it the modified way, but do it. So
your uncle, what was your uncle's name?
Uncle Big Mac.
Uncle Big Mac. Okay, I love it. I love
we called him, his name is Philip Graham, but that's all we knew was Uncle Big Mac. And that was the only place his house was the place that for Halloween, he had a party every year. And all the kids in the neighborhood got to come with our makeshift costumes, and he would play music, Double Dutch. I remember Double Dutch bus, and he sounded just like the guy. And he would be singing on his little microphone, and we do the jumping jacks and the jump rope and the costume contest and candy hunts. That was our one time a year where we got to feel like we did something. I mean, he was just the best and tried to give us exposure in Acres-Home. So Uncle Big Mac said, you got to get that diploma. And I did that. I lived with him. I was going to work and I went back to school. And that's actually when I knew I wanted to be a doctor. And I was actually featured in my school paper. They wanted to do a paper on me because we were still, people don't realize this, we were still integrating back then.
Okay.
And so they took a portion of Acres-Home where I lived and shipped us off to Humble, to Aldine ISD back when it was like going decline. I mean, it was a very prestigious ISD, and there were about 2 streets that they sent us out there. So that was like, whoa, there are no police and there's no fighting, and people's clothes were ugly, but no one cared,
They were just there for the knowledge. That's it.
Yeah. So I fit in because I didn't have cool clothes. And
Man, so Uncle Big Mac changed the trajectory of your life.
He did. He amazing. And we lost him about 7 years ago. But
Sorry to hear that.
Uncle Big Mac, he's the man, and I loved him. And so I finished high school, and I met my husband, got married, and I had everything. I was married. We built a home, and I had 2 more children, and everything was great until it was not. I got involved in ministry. That's when I really found myself, because way back then when the molestation happened, even my church treated me differently. So I lost all my leadership roles, and it was just bad. So I even had this stigma against the church. So I got back involved in ministry very heavily. I am an ordained pastor. I've been to seminary.
That is
I've
great.
done mission work. I worked full-time ministry, and that was a beautiful time in my life. And then it wasn't. My marriage really went down, and I lost myself. I was very timid, and the only time I felt power or control is when I was teaching a class, a discipleship class, or leading prayer service or in the pulpit was the only time I felt like myself. And outside of that, I was a prisoner. And I remember being at a conference and Cheryl Brady was speaking here at the Fountain of Praise.
Okay.
And she was telling the story of Mephibosheth. And it was a line in there where David asked him, what do you want? Because he didn't know he was royalty. Mephibosheth didn't know that he had all of this. And King David found out, and he was like, no, that crippled man belongs at this table. And when Cheryl Brady talked about David asking him, what did he want? She stopped and she asked us, like, you're the Mephibosheth, what do you want?
What do you want?
And it hit me that everything I said I wanted was what my pastor wanted, what my husband wanted, what the head of this wanted, what my mother-in-law wanted. Tamika had lost herself, her drive, everything. And I started to really go into depression at that point. But I was doing God's work and being a good wife, so I didn't challenge it. And then I had a stroke at home. Actually, 2 strokes and a heart attack at home.
Oh, okay.
I know we need a part 2 to the show.
I may have to cut it right here. Wow.
Yeah.
So
and I was in the middle of a 40-day fast. I was on day 38. And I was fasting from flesh, from meat, feelings and all of
absolutely,
that.
Absolutely.
It was the Daniel. And it was about my marriage and my life and my calling. And am I really doing what God wants me to do? Because I felt that void. He brought things to my attention. And on day 38, full on stroke, paralyzed, can't talk, can't walk, can't eat, can't swallow, full on stroke in the hospital, alive, but unable, incapable, just existing.
So just existing, right? So, but you're doing a Daniel fast. You're doing the fast of all fasts, the good fast, and this was your reward or your result.
It was my reward.
Anybody in their right mind would say this is the worst thing ever that can happen to me. So 2 strokes and a heart attack while you're at home. Where were your kids and your husband throughout all of this?
I was in my bathroom getting ready for a bath. And I was working for the church full time, and we were launching a new website. And I was getting ready to have a meeting with the team on what that looked like. I used to do graphic design and build websites and all that too. My daughter.
Is there anything you don't do?
I know, but this was all a part of the job and the journey and the learning, and that's another thing. I'm a helper.
Okay.
If you hire me, I promise I'll learn everything to do to help you.
Okay.
But my oldest daughter and my husband was in the bedroom folding laundry, and they knew when I went in the bathroom, just give me my moment. I need my peace. And so I had just disrobed, and I was about to get in the bathtub, and I had sat down to I think I sat down to take off my socks. So I was finished taking off my clothes anyway. I was sitting down, and then that's when it happened. All of a sudden, the world just kind of got real floaty. And then I realized I got heavy and I couldn't hold myself up. And I was trying to say something and my mouth wouldn't move. And I don't know how long I was in there, but my oldest daughter said that she heard some weird noise and my voice sounded weird.
Just getting ready to take a shower and get all that stuff ready for the day. And then the world goes all and becomes floaty.
Yeah, it was like floating. I was heavy. I couldn't hold myself up. I tried to make a noise or cry out, and my voice wouldn't come. I couldn't move my mouth. I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't do anything. And my oldest daughter said she heard a weird noise from the bathroom. She just felt something, and I guess I mustered up some type of sound, and she, busted the door down because it was locked. And they found me slumped over, unresponsive, just my eyes open. And I remember feeling the tingling from my chest to my arm, completely paralyzed. My ex-husband just froze. He just froze. And my oldest daughter, bless her heart, she just went into action. She must have been about 10 at the time, 10 or 11. And she got me up and took me outside, was telling my ex-husband to call 911, tell him what was happening. And then, I mean, she was so amazing. I'm sorry. She was so amazing because I could see what's happening. They just didn't know that I could. And I saw her go upstairs and get her two little sisters because she didn't want them to hear the ambulance. And one was a baby, one was a toddler, just about 4 years old. And she walked them. She said, "Oh, we're gonna go spend the night at Mr. BJ's house." And she, in their pajamas, she walked them down to our neighbors, told our neighbors what was happening, and took care of them. And she came back and sat with me.
That's, I mean, for a 10-year-old to have that kind of presence of mind to shield their siblings from, you know, what would be like a tough visual to see any parent going through, or any person, period, going through. That's a whole adult at the age of 10. You know, there's a simple way I can put it.
Wow. And then she just came and she sat in front of me and she was rubbing my arm and she was like, "Mom, it's going to be okay." And she just kept talking to me. She just knew to keep talking. And I remember her being the hero during that time. I mean, I remember my ex-husband just froze and he just went into shock. And she just really stepped in. And so then we had that. At the end of the day, I ended up completely paralyzed on the left side. And I had to go through rehab. I was in ICU for about 3 weeks because I had another stroke after I had been admitted. They couldn't get my heart under control. So I was in ICU. I remember how traumatizing that was. Every 30 minutes or hour, you're hearing code blue, code blue. I remember seeing stretchers bring people in, and 5 minutes later, the stretcher taking someone out with their body completely covered. That was so traumatic. And what I remember God telling me during that time, the conversation was, if I got through this, I had to use everything I had for His glory, that I had been using it for people. And I was out of line with Him. That was the answer to my fast. And that was the only way He could illustrate it to me, because I was so deep in my mind in going to church and serving in the ministry and doing whatever my husband said. It didn't matter how much I was suffering and hurting in that relationship and how selfish he was and not looking out for my best interest, none of that. And God was like, "I called you to me." And I was able to see what it was like, what I looked like to Him. I was present, but I wasn't doing anything.
You were paralyzed.
Yeah, I was spiritually paralyzed. Yeah. And so they told me I would be in a nursing home for months and then have some deformity for the rest of my life. I did not accept that. And I just prayed and worked and I continued my fast and didn't watch TV or anything. And I worked through that. And 3 months afterwards, instead of moving to my final place after the rehab center, I was on a mission trip in the Dominican in Haiti, helping people. And I was walking without a cane and helping people. But I broke through that, and I promised God, whatever He told me to do, I was going to do it. I did not want to be paralyzed again.
So you had a total of 3 strokes. Let me get this right. 2 before you went in and 1 when you were in there, a heart attack. Yeah. And you still continued the Daniel fast.
Yeah.
Okay. That is obedience in its highest form, if I've ever seen it or heard of it. So from all that information, what I'm seeing is that you seem to have gone through like a spiritual rebirth by being broken down to a paralyzed form of your current self, or your former self rather, and then being reborn to be able to walk, talk, move, and do everything all again.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
It was something. So after that, I would say is when everything took off. when my marriage got to its worst and it was impacting my kids, they were afraid to go to sleep at night in their own rooms. They were being dropped out of the gifted and talented classes. God said it's time to go. And I left. I told my husband, and he switched and say, well, you can't have the house and you can't do this. I would have to fight. I was just like, well, then I'll leave. And I left. From that moment on, when God said do something, even now, I'm going to do it. And as he shared those things, it was like, time to leave your husband. The timing was perfect when we get to my career, because I left him. I had to find a place. My daughters and I shared a 1-bedroom apartment, and we took turns in who slept in the bed. We had to start over from scratch, but it was fun. Tamagwa, where I work now, I was a volunteer back then at their annual event. The staff put together an offering for Christmas. They took up a little collection, and they brought over a card. They were able to put together about $35. And my daughters and I went and got some tennis rackets from Goodwill. So we had an activity. They brought us a Christmas tree, that silk one, and they brought us popcorn and the little cherries and the little instructions on how to make a wreath. And they made little gift bags for my children so they could have presents for Christmas. And then they brought us one of those. Somebody had donated this old portable spring bed. You remember those that you could pop out?
Oh, absolutely.
And fold back up?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, someone brought one of those, and so we could pull that out in the living room sometimes, and 2 people could sleep in the bed. But it was the greatest gesture, a charity that I had supported and volunteered for. People there who didn't have much pulled together to try to help me. And I wasn't a big donor or anything. I was just a supporter, and they helped us through that. And then my children and I got so close because we had to do everything together. We had times where we didn't have electricity. And if they got home before I did, they knew the routine. Pull out the candles, lay out your clothes, take your shower. I'll stop at McDonald's and get 35 nuggets for $4. We'll eat that for dinner.
Solid.
And we just had our routine, and we got so close. But the timing of that was perfect, because the first job I had, they had just lost the admissions director. And so when I came back to apply, I literally put some on Facebook that, hey, I'm back on the market. And then I just was being recruited like crazy. I got that job, and it was, and then from that job, the hospital near me was going through a transition. A new company bought him out. And if I had not been in that job at that time, I wouldn't have been recruited for my first hospital job for the physician relations program, because they had lost the relationship with the doctors. They needed someone who could really pull them back online. And somebody at that hospital who just knew me from the community,
from before,
from my job that I had started, and say, you need to get that Timika girl over at Park Manor. She's really good. And the doctors like her. Then, and this corporation was out of Tennessee. Then they talked to some of the doctors, and they're like, oh yeah, if you get Timika in here, it'll be great. So those people started recruiting me. I worked there. I did a great job. 2 years later, then Houston Methodist called me, and then they started recruiting me for a larger job, footprint expansion, and then the Harris County Housing Authority. So it just, if I had not moved when God told me to move and go where, I would have missed that entire chain of events and all the things I learned on those jobs, and taking the approach of studying my environment, getting next to the people in charge, sitting in a meeting and really learning how they operate, even if I don't have to contribute in that meeting. But it's the reason I'm there. I was learning and studying and gathering and learning and studying and gathering, and nothing hurt my feelings. If I didn't get invited to this or that, all that had been resolved as a kid. If somebody was mean to me, I don't know, it just didn't bother me. But people were watching me, and I learned that I wasn't the only one watching the room. The room was watching me.
Exactly right.
And I always did my job. I did it great. I always looked at, how do I make this better? Because that's what the big people did. They were always studying and dissecting things, and how do we grow? So that was my mindset, and applying those skills from job to job. Every time somebody somewhere with power and influence said my name and got me to my next place, it happened every time. And it was taking all those things I learned from all of those adversities and applying them wherever I was, because I had these children at home to take care of. And God called me to him. And my mission is to serve his people here. He has a lot of people here who needs a voice. And I have that voice, and I have the strength to survive and endure anything that it takes to make sure people are taken care of. So
I think you probably got more than what it takes to survive. So it's just hearing all of the ins and outs, the highs, the lows, the successes, the failures. In the course of your marriage, when you're thinking everything is going great, I'm being an obedient wife and this and that, the third, and wham, no, you're not doing the right thing according to God. So like, he's like, I got this whole other thing for you. And that to me is the true definition of your strength being built up, and you being filled up with God to get on to the next part of your journey. So, from the standpoint of watching them put together that Christmas package for your family, how did you feel? Because here you are, second time in your life, sleeping on the floor.
I think about that. Yeah. That I was in a zone at that time of just survival and mentally carrying my kids. They were struggling psychologically because my ex-husband separated from them as well. He was so mad at me. He wanted to hurt them to hurt me, because remember, I carried my pain well. And so I had 3 people who were mentally impacted a different way. Their whole world has changed. And then I had myself. So I never had time to stop or cry or be emotional. That would have been a luxury. So I was just grateful. I just had to show them how to be grateful. So when it happened, I acted like it was the best thing that could have happened. And so then they acted like it was the best thing that happened. And we were all so happy.
Hence the tennis rackets. Hence the tennis rackets. Let's go get tennis rackets.
Oh, let's go to Goodwill and we could buy tennis rackets. And then every week we would go out there and play tennis. And one of my daughters kept hitting the ball over the wall, and it was a big adventure going to get it. And I just did what our parents did when I came up here. You just go outside and play. I just reverted to what I did after what happened with my dad. Let's go outside and play.
Let's go outside and play.
Let's find the positive in this. And it made my girls strong. And now if you meet them, they are just amazing young ladies, and they're kind of the same. They take life by the horn, and they're very happy people. They struggled mentally. They were sad, depressed. One was suicidal. One, I couldn't keep up with her. The other, she got down a really scary path. It was really hard for them. So I had to keep pursuing and growing and being a very exceptional businesswoman, so that I can get the resources I needed to provide a better environment, because I really understood the power of environment from a child. From when I was a child. And so a lot of my drive and motivation was, I need to change their environment. We were not in the best neighborhood. We were not in the best schools. They were not used to that. And so I had to change the environment. So when I went to work, I was on it. I was smart. I was not an executive by title, but I operated like one every day until I got there.
So I know earlier you said you had set out to be a doctor. I didn't hear you say MD or anything like that behind your name at any point throughout this story. Like, what happened?
Well, I couldn't. My ex-husband said it was taking up too much time. I was in the lab a lot. My undergrad was biotechnology, pre-med biotechnology. I didn't go back to school until my youngest daughter was born, go back to college. And he didn't like how much time I had to spend doing research and things like that. And I told him, I was like, well, you can't get into med school with a B. You got to have an A. It's very competitive. And then number 2, when I become a doctor, I'll be busy. And then he said, well, you can't be a doctor. So I said, okay. That's the person I was. I just said, okay.
Maybe that might have been the best thing that could happen to you, because now you have a different vantage point. You're actually looking at the most qualified or the best fit doctors to come into your organization and work with the type of people that actually need the help and just can't afford it. So maybe he was a gift in disguise by saying that.
That was, and I'll give him that. You're right. I have to give him that. To me, it was controlling and mean. But
yeah, definitely.
But before he did that, and I didn't even pay attention to it until now because I worked in physical therapy. I remember seeing the administrators come through, and I remember seeing some patients getting denied this luxury living for their physical therapy, the seniors. And I saw where someone of wealth could come in and use senior citizen Medicaid or Medicare to get this care, but someone who didn't have wealth, who had the same insurance, would be denied, and they would be sent to the place down the street where you get bed sores. And then when I learned of administrators make those decisions, then I said I wanted to be an administrator. But when I went back to school, my mind went back to doctor. So that was God even using my husband to say, no, do something different. So I went the administrative route, and my first job was an admissions director, and I was in charge of who got to come.
Great.
And the doctor who saved me after I had my stroke, because they were going to send me home, the ER thought I was a young person having a mental breakdown or overworked or something. And so I was just laying in a room paralyzed, and he wouldn't run a test or anything. My labs were still sitting on the counter, and he was just like, oh, in a couple of hours, she'll be fine. And I'm sitting there like, and the doctor who was rounding late that night saw my name. He looked in there, he said, oh no, I know this woman. Something's wrong. And he took over the case. I could hear him fighting with the ER doctor. And he ran the test, and that's how they found out I had the stroke. But I met that man because he came in my facility fighting because he wanted to send all these indigent patients to my facility. But the owners didn't want that, so I struck a deal with him. And he's a really good doctor. We're still friends today. And I struck a deal, and I was like, you give me 5 good insurance paying doctors, patients, and I'll take one of your indigents. And we had that deal, and he loved me. And he ended up being the one that saved me that night.
So a third person, you had 3 people in this story come through your life at the right critical moment to give you what you need and get you fixed up and on your way, so to speak. So, wow.
Yeah.
So I know you have a pretty busy schedule, but just if you can, I got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
So because this is the Human Side of Greatness podcast, I got to ask you, to Timika, what does the human side of greatness look like?
I think the human side of greatness, just for Timika, is you have to be unapologetic about where God is pulling you. And you really have to know where God is pulling you. And it can't be influenced by anyone or anything else. Because back to what I said before, hindsight is 20/20. Yeah. But we're defining the hindsight right now. And sometimes we're hurt if we wait till the end. And then we're looking back and saying, whoa, I should have, or man, I thought this was so we're defining hindsight right now. And the only way I know in terms of the human side of greatness is we'll be as close to the perfect will of God for our lives as possible if we're truly saying, God, align my will with your will. Even in every situation, it may not make sense. I mean, my story was like, what's his name? People always tell me in the Bible, but he went from one thing to another. It was like
Joseph?
tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And people have told me, you're Joseph.
You are Joseph. Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and it's like, but the human side of greatness says, but this is a part of something. And I trust what God is doing. So instead of being sad or comparing myself, I didn't get to become a doctor. I'm a single mom with 3 kids. I have health issues. I'm not married. I'm a CEO, but not of a hospital, just of a charity. I was a size 4, and now I'm a size 8. Instead of all that whine, it's like, God has me here for something. Let me learn, let me study, let me go outside and play. Let me get everything I can in this moment, in this time, because then there's going to be a next step.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to be at the place where you say hindsight and have to look back, and you want to be happy. I like right now where I can say, in hindsight, I'm so glad I took that job and I made that move and I made that decision and I left that guy and I waited on that car, because in hindsight, I would have missed out on all the gifts and tools and everything I have right now that's allowing me to run this organization. Every job I had, it seemed like they were hiring me to fix a problem. And I kept saying, can I just get a job where the problem is fixed and I don't have to stress? But man, this organization needed to transpire. It had grown from under itself. It was massive. You had partners, and you needed this dynamic leader who understood all the facets and could take it there. I wouldn't have been able to do this job. So my favorite quote, and you're going to ask me, is when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. But that goes with my definition of the human side of greatness. Right now, we're in that preparation. So just see everything as preparation. And that's greatness. That's joy to me.
That is just a powerful way to kind of close this out. And I want you to just repeat the quote one more time so the listeners can hear it and let it seep in.
When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare.
Fantastic. Tamika, I can't thank you enough. You have an amazing story. Again, like I said at the beginning, a story of strength on top of strength on top of strength to make you the person that you are. So you've been fully prepared for today and the future. So thank you for being on the Human Side of Greatness.
Thank you for having me.